What is our common bond truly? Freedom.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly. I order all those assembled to immediately disperse.
What it's all about, and it's the only thing that it's all about, nothing else.
The old way is in the certain process of destruction, and a new world order is beating down the door.
Many will argue that in order to change the world and bring about peace, we need to fight harder against our perceived enemies. Fighting for peace is like shouting for silence. It just creates more of what you don't want. These days there's a war against everything. A war against terror, a war against disease, a war against hunger. Every war is actually a war against ourselves. The fight is part of a collective delusion. We say that we want peace, but we continue to elect leaders who engage in war. We lie to ourselves, saying that we are for human rights, but continue to buy products made in sweatshops. We say we want clean air, but we continue to pollute. We want science to cure us of cancer, but won't change our self-destructive habitual behaviors that make us more likely to be sick. We delude ourselves that we are promoting a better life. We don't want to see our hidden parts that are condoning suffering and death. The belief that we can win a war against cancer, hunger, terror, or any enemy that was created by our own thinking and behavior actually lets us continue to delude ourselves that we don't have to change the way we operate on this planet. The inner world is where the revolution must first take place. Only when we can directly feel the spiral of life within will the outer world come into alignment with the Tao. Until then, anything we do will add to the chaos already created by the mind. War and peace arise together in an endless dance. They are one continuum. One half cannot exist without the other. Just as light cannot exist without dark, and up cannot exist without down. The world seems to want light without darkness, fullness without emptiness, happiness without sadness. Today, the serpent is living as you. It is the egoic mind expressed as the manifested world. We have never before had access to so much knowledge. We've gone deep into the material world, even finding the so-called God particle. But we've never been more limited, more ignorant of who we are and how to live. And we do not understand the mechanism by which we create suffering.
it's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter.
There is
Matter seems like a good place to begin. The solidity of the world seems totally indisputable. As a fixed thing that you can see and touch, your body is also reassuringly solid. But beginning with Einstein, modern physics has assured us that this solidity is a mirage.
All of physical matter, everything we have around us, is the result of a frequency. And what that also means is that if you amplify the frequency, the structure of the matter will change.
Our thinking has created the world as it is now. Whenever we label something as good or bad, or create a preference in our mind, it's due to the coming into being of egoic structures, or self-interests. The solution is not to fight for peace or conquer nature, but to simply recognize the truth that the very existence of the ego structure creates duality, a split between self and other, mine and yours, man and nature, inner and outer. The ego is violence. It requires a barrier, a boundary from the other in order to be. Without the ego, there's no war against anything. There's no hubris. There's no overreaching nature to create profit. These external crises in our world reflect a serious inner crisis. We don't know who we are. We are completely identified with our egoic identities, consumed by fears, and are cut off from our true nature. Races, religions, countries, political affiliations, and any group that we belong to all reinforce our egoic identities. Almost every group that exists on the planet today wants to claim its perspective as true and correct, as we do on an individual. By claiming the truth as its own, the group perpetuates its own existence, in the same way that an ego or self-structure defines itself against other. Now, more than ever, different realities and polarized belief systems are coexisting on Earth. It is possible for different people to experience completely different thoughts and emotional reactions to the very same external phenomena. In the same way, samsara and nirvana, or heaven and hell, are two different dimensions occupying the very same world. An event that may appear apocalyptic to one person could be seen as a blessing to another. So what is becoming obvious is that your external circumstances don't have to affect your inner world in any particular way. To become autonomous, a universe unto oneself. Your experience of life is not contingent on changing phenomena. An analogy can be made with Metatron's cube. Metatron is mentioned in various ancient Christian, Islamic, and Jewish texts, and is archetypally related to the Egyptian Neter Thoth, as well as Hermes Trismegistus of Greece. Here we see a two-dimensional representation of the figure, but if you look a certain way, you see a 3D cube. When you see the cube, nothing has changed in the figure, but your mind has added a new dimension to your seeing. Dimensionality, or one's perspective, is simply a matter of becoming habituated to a new way of perceiving the world. We become free of perspective, or free to create new perspectives, because there's no self invested in or attached to a particular viewpoint. The greatest minds in human history have often pointed to levels of thought beyond the limited self-structure. Einstein said, "The true measure of a human being is determined primarily by the measure and sense in which he has attained liberation from the self." So it's not that thinking in the existence of the self is bad. Thinking is a wonderful tool when the mind is in service to the heart. In Vedanta, it is said that the mind makes a good servant, but a poor master. The moment a child is told what a bird is, if they believe what they're told, then they never see a bird again. They only see their thoughts. Most people think that they are free, conscious, and awake. But if you believe you are already awake, then why would you do the difficult work to attain what you believe you already have? Before it becomes possible to awaken, it is necessary to accept that you are asleep, living in the matrix. Examine your life honestly without lying to yourself. Are you able to stop your robotic, repetitive life patterns if you want to? Can you stop seeking pleasure and avoiding pain? Are you addicted to certain foods, activities, or pastimes? Are you constantly judging, blaming, criticizing yourself and others? Does your mind incessantly seek out stimulus, or are you completely fulfilled just being in silence? Do you react to how people think about you? Are you seeking approval and positive reinforcement? Do you somehow sabotage situations in your life? Most people will experience their lives the same way today as they will tomorrow, and a year from now, and 10 years from now. When you begin to observe your robot-like nature, you become more awake. You begin to recognize the depth of the problem. You are completely and utterly asleep, lost in a dream. Like the inhabitants of Plato's cave, most who hear this truth will not be willing or capable of changing their lives because they are attached to their familiar patterns. We go to great lengths justifying our patterns, burying our heads in the sand rather than facing the truth. We want our saviors, but we are not willing to get up on the cross ourselves. What are you willing to pay to be free? Realize that if you change your inner world, you must be prepared to change the outer life. Your old structure and your old identity must become the dead soil out of which new growth comes. The great wisdom, the truth of who you are, is buried deep within your being.
Here is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.